Alright, so Hezekiah, King Hezekiah is who we were looking at last week. And we saw some of the good stuff that Hezekiah did. And we'll run through this is working really well. Line of David, Hezekiah, and see where we're at as far as the kingdom goes, and the line of dynasty that's going on in Judah. 715 to 686 BC, where we're at. 729, kind of where we're looking at specifically. And this is, we saw last week with Hezekiah, some of the good things that he was doing, right? At this point, the kingdom had pretty much not been very good as far as the worship and following of God. Hezekiah came in and pretty much revamped all of that, right? We saw him coming in and he was humble in his worship. He was openly very humble in his worship, and it had a great effect on the people that saw him as well. He opened back up the temple, went in, cleaned out all the pagan stuff out of the temple. They went in and cleansed every room, every corner, every crack, every crevice of the temple. They went in and cleansed it and started the burning of sacrifices and the burning of incenses as well, which was the case. He set back up the high priest, the Levites brought them in. So he's going back to the ways of how things should have been done now for the years that they hadn't been happening, essentially. And because of that, we see the resuming of temple worship. The people came in groves as well. We've got this huge spiritual revival, this spiritual reawakening that's taking place in the kingdoms, both the southern and northern kingdoms. Now, there were some people who bucked him. Some people who thought this was not a good idea, thought it was silly and stupid, and kind of rebuked him for it as well. And we saw a couple of those things last week. They brought in the Passover in 2 Chronicles chapter 30. And the Passover was such a celebration, right? They decided to extend it for a whole other week afterwards. Because I think people were just so enthusiastic and so joyous. And all, of course, was coming from the fact that these people were enjoying the Spirit of God again, right? That's essentially what was happening. The joy that comes from the Lord, these people were experiencing it because they were following after what He wanted them to do. He also destroyed the pagan altars and all of the images. We've said this now, that even some of the kings that were following after God to a certain degree, they would still allow the pagan images to kind of stay up in the country. That was not the case with Hezekiah. He got rid of them. Everyone, every corner, every place he could went in and had them destroyed. Alright? We reestablished also last week the feasts, reestablished the tithings that should have been in place, but they had been gone by the wayside. So he put all this stuff back into order. And of course, as we saw, because of this, God blessed Hezekiah. Right? And we've seen this pattern before. Even when some of these kings even didn't totally surrender, right? Just did a couple of things that God wanted them to do. God blessed them. Then they would kind of fall back into their wicked ways or decide to do things their own way. And some problems would fall because of it. Alright? Now, we started a little bit of this last week, and we're going to finish it up today. That's Hezekiah's fearful pride. Alright? Now, if you remember, during the reign of Hezekiah's father, Ahaz, that we talked about 2 weeks ago, I think, Judah paid this tribute to the king of Syria, and King Sargon, who it was. And Hezekiah, when he came in, decided that he was going to stop these payments, or these payments to this king. When Sargon was killed in battle, and the new king, his name is Sennacherib, he became the king. Hezekiah's decision here to kind of quit doing that led to this crisis. And this new king had to deal with the matter, deal with the other matters as well as this new king. And then if you look at 2 Kings chapter 18, and if you look at verse 13, this new king, 8 years have passed now, okay? And eventually he comes in and invades Judah as well and captures these new fortified cities that Hezekiah kind of helped set up. Right, look at verse 13 of chapter 18, 2 Kings. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah did Sennacherib, king of Assyria, come up against all of the fenced cities of Judah, so the fortified cities that built up, and he took them. Okay? So he comes in and captures these fortified cities. Go Go to verse 14. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria, to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me that which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah king of Judah 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house. In that time did Hezekiah cut off the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord, and from the pillars which Hezekiah king of Judah had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. So now, we spent all last week, we spent 45 minutes that week, looking at all the great things that Hezekiah did for the temple, for the people, and for God. He quit paying the payments out to Sargon, which was a good thing. In just 8 quick years, right, the new king comes in and captures a couple of the cities, and what does Hezekiah do almost instantly? Paying that tribute back, right? He gives them gold, gives them silver, starts paying this money, this tribute money to this new king. 11 tons of silver and 1 ton of gold, okay? And where did he get this silver and gold from? From the house of the Lord, right? From the temple. He went in God's house and took it and gave it to this king. Because of that, we see that the king of Assyria withdrawn from Judah and kind of taking and accepting the tribute money. And so Hezekiah here humbles himself, pays this money, humbles himself to who? This decision of Hezekiah, he is humbling himself to who? To God or to the other king? To the king, right? He's not humbling himself to God here, okay? He's humbling himself to the king. And humbling himself before this new enemy, essentially. And he neglects humbling himself before God, right? This guy comes in and invades these fortified cities. The old Hezekiah that we looked at last week, his response probably should have been and would have been, go to God in prayer, right? Let's see what God wants me to do about this. Let's act. Obviously, God has allowed this to happen for a reason. Let's talk to God. Let's pray. Let's go to God and see how He would have me want to, or how He would want me to respond to this situation. But instead of going and praying about the situation, Hezekiah is worried, takes his own fear, takes his own decision, and pays out his kings. Now, it appears that chronologically, okay, the next major event that we see in the life of Hezekiah happens over in 2 Kings chapter 20. Okay, so let's jump over to 2 Kings chapter 20 and look at verse 20. And we see the next chronological big thing that happened here in the life of Hezekiah is that in those days was Hezekiah what? Sick unto death. So Hezekiah here has a terminally ill, a terminal illness that's kind of happened to him. And that's kind of the next big thing that takes place here. Isaiah, prophet, visits him and gives him a message directly from the Lord. And he essentially tells Hezekiah that he needs to set his affairs in order. And let's continue to look here in verse 20. And the prophet of Isaiah, the son of Amos, came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die, and not live. And he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, we're going to stop right there just for a second. So Isaiah shows up, comes in, tells him that the sickness that he has contracted, and he's not going to recover from it. It is going to kill him. So he needs to make sure he gets his family, gets his affairs, gets the house, get stuff in order that he needs to have in order. And this Hezekiah here at this time is 39 years old. Okay, so he's still a pretty young man. And this announcement that comes from Isaiah really troubles him and really bothers him. Now, if you go to 2 Chronicles with me, let's go back over there, and let's look at chapter 32. And jump down to verse 25 of that chapter. We see where this sickness came from. Okay? 2 Chronicles 32, verse 25. But Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him. For, that's 31. Yet the Hezekiah rendered not again according to the benefit done unto him, for his heart was lifted up. Therefore there was wrath upon him, and upon Judah, and upon Jerusalem. So this announcement of this terminal illness comes directly as discipline that the Lord had given him because he had become too proud in his own accomplishments. Okay? So because of his pride and his accomplishments and what he'd done, he then paid tribute out to the king, didn't go to God, and then God then caused him to have this illness as punishment. Okay? And as well as giving of the temple silver, the temple gold, and stuff, the way in which he conducted himself during this. He's trusted in the other king instead of God. Was probably more than likely some of the reason we had this action that kind of happened, this disciplinary action that comes against Hezekiah. Judah's king here responded with humility. Right? So when he gets this sentence, gets this announcement from Isaiah, he responds with humility. And if you'll go with me to Isaiah chapter 38, and we're going to kind of see the response of this here. Isaiah chapter 38. And go to verse 10. All right, we're going to read down through verse 14. We can start verse 9, so you believe in Hezekiah. The writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, which he had been sick and was recovered of his sickness. I said, in the cutting off of my days, I shall go to the gate of the grave. I am deprived of the residue of my years. I said, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord, in the land of the living. I shall behold man no more with the inhabitants of the world. Mine age is departed, and is removed from me as a shepherd's tent. I have cut off like a weaver of my life. He will cut me off with pining sickness. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. I reckon till morning, but as a lion, so he will break all my bones. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. Like a crane or a swallow, so did I chatter. I did mourn as a dove, mine eyes fell with looking upward. O Lord, I am oppressed, undertake it for me. So we see the lamenting here centrally of Hezekiah. And by looking at those 4 verses there, and this Hezekiah speaking, what did Hezekiah try to remind the Lord of? What is he trying to remind the Lord of? Read down there, read those verses to yourself again. Verses 10 through 14. What do you think Hezekiah is trying to remind the Lord of? Feels like he's dying early. And he's also trying to remind the Lord that even though he had made this mistake, that there was a time that what? Exactly. There was a time that he did good. Hezekiah here is trying to remind the Lord that he had walked in truth with a loyal heart, and that he had done what was right in God's sight. And then we see him asking as well, in verse 14, that he's wanting the Lord, he's asking the Lord to undertake for him or to be his security. Now, at this point in Hezekiah's life, probably the most powerful king in the world, one of the most powerful kings in the world at this time, young man, things have been pretty good for him. Hezekiah at this point, though, wasn't being proud in his reminding the Lord what he had done for him. God had promised to bless the kings who had walked in his ways. Hezekiah here is just reminding God of his faithfulness to him earlier. How would Hezekiah have reacted to the bad news if he was doing so out of a proud heart? We see Hezekiah here saying, you know, I'm dying young, I understand why I'm dying young, but there was a time in which I lived for you as well, and you said you'd be faithful to us for those who would live, and you were faithful to me. What would the reaction have been here of Hezekiah if he was reacting from a proud heart? Would we see him reacting the same way? Probably not, right? We've seen other kings do this, right? We've seen other kings who have been proud, who then God has rain down some judgment or discipline on them. And then they have lashed out from a proud heart. And we saw that they were bitter about what God was doing to them, angry at God for giving them sickness or giving them the whatever the problem was. But we see Hezekiah here obviously being humble before him, humble before God, and reminding God of his faithfulness too. All right? If you see, go back to 2 Kings with me now. I know we're all over the place today. Back to 2 Kings in chapter 20 and down to verse 8, we see God's answering of Hezekiah's prayer. And his answering of Hezekiah's kind of lamenting out to him. Okay? Verse 8, chapter 22 Kings. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, What shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me? That I shall go up to the house of the Lord the third day. And Isaiah said, This sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he had spoken. So the shadow go forth 10 degrees and go back 10 degrees. And Hezekiah answered, It is a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. Nay, but let the shadow return backwards 10 degrees. And Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backwards, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. So the Lord here hears Hezekiah's prayer and then promises him that within 3 days that he will be healed. And confident here that the Lord is going to keep his promise, Hezekiah asked the Lord what sign he's going to get to see this receiving being promised to be healed in 3 days. And the sign was the retreating of the shadows by 10 degrees. Okay, that's what we see there, verses 10 and 11 talk about the shadow going back and forward 10 degrees. All right? So, with the moving of the shadow 10 degrees, there leads this whole, what in the world does that mean? Right? Well, why is there 4 verses in here about the moving of the shadow 10 degrees? Okay. A couple questions that we need to ask. I'm not going to spend too much time here because we could probably spend a couple hours here if we wanted to. So with the moving of the shadow there, the question is asked, did God actually take the rotation of the earth and then reverse it? Okay, that would be what move the shadow back 10 degrees. Did God reverse the direction of the earth's rotation? Or did he cause the sun's position to change somehow in the sky? Those are things that would affect the shadow, right? Standing here, think that rudimentary way to do this. If I go, you turn the lights off, I have a flashlight above my head, holding it up here. If I move it in the direction 10 degrees, the shadow is going to move 10 degrees, correct? If I hold the flashlight still and I move, then the shadow still moves 10 degrees. That's kind of the 2 things that could happen here. Okay? Does that make sense now? Now, what actually happened? We don't know, right? We don't know what happened. Just like when God caused the sun to quit moving over the battle of Moses' arms out. Remember the sun didn't come down as long as his arms there. They had to hold him up. Same thing there. Right? Obviously something had to have happened to keep the sun up. Something physical had to have happened here to cause this shadow to move in the direction that it did. We have to remember, right? We can talk about all the things that physically could have taken place. God changing the rotation of the earth. There's a whole science behind the fact that we have a leap year is one of the reasons because of Moses' arms and what happened during the sun. That's why we have, there's a whole thing you can read about that. All that stuff doesn't matter, right? To look at the little things that could have happened that caused the shadow, what we need to remember is that God had the power to do this, right? He's standing there, he sees his shadow, and he sees it move 10 degrees. It goes out, it comes back. And God has the power to do that. Okay? He has the ability to just simply say, all right, let's just make a shadow move back and forth. He can do that because that's who God is. Right? We can't grasp how he did it. We can think about it, we can try to reason it, but we can't grasp the reason or how he was. God is not bound by our human mind, right? He's not bound by the limitations of our human minds. So we see him, God then, Hezekiah asked him for a sign. The sign there was then given, retreating of the shadow by 10 degrees. Whatever happened, it doesn't matter. This amazing event was heralded. The thing that happened, it happened so abroad, so many people knew about it, that even the Babylonians, All right, wondered about this miraculous sign. So Hezekiah saw his shadow move 10 degrees back and forward, and this miracle that took place was so heralded that there was a bunch of people, even the Babylonians, wondered why this happened and about this miraculous sign. Look at 2 Kings 20 and verse 12. And at the time, Baradak Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And if you go back with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 32, and let's look at verse 31 of that chapter, it says that, howbeit, in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. So this miracle that took place, everybody kind of knew about this, all right? It was a really big deal, a really big event. So God answers the prayer here of Hezekiah's physical healing, and he used a medical treatment to accomplish it. Okay? Back to 2 Kings with me. Let's go to verse 7 of chapter 20 this time. And Isaiah said to do this. Right? So he's granting him this answered prayer, and he's using a actual medical treatment to accomplish it. Verse 7, take a lump of figs, and they took it, and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, what shall be the sign, Lord? We see him going back and forth. So we see this thing taking place, this medical treatment here of these figs, and the thing kind of that happened, and the Lord granting essentially Hezekiah 15 more years because of him seeing the error or seeing the flaws in how he handled the situation with the new king of Assyria. All right? Now we see Hezekiah's fearful pride. We jump down now to verse 12 of chapter 20, and we see Hezekiah's imprudent pride. All right? When the king of Babylon, heard of this serious illness that Hezekiah had, he sent messengers up with a gift. We saw that in verse 20. Imprudently, Hezekiah shows off here the wealth of Judah. Let's go to verse 13 of 2 Kings 20. And down to verse 13. And Hezekiah again hears this. We see this king sending up these gifts. Hezekiah hearkens unto them and showed him all the house of the precious things, the silver, the gold, the spices, and the precious ornaments, and all the houses of his armor, and all that was found in his treasure. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed him not. So Hezekiah then showed off the wealth of Judah. And what did Hezekiah here, recently healed, what did Hezekiah forget to do when Babylon inquired about seeing all this land and all this treasure? What did Hezekiah forget to do when Babylon comes in and asks to see all these things? Exactly. Right? He forgot to consult the Lord. Forgets to consult the Lord. Now, Hezekiah was sick. What did Hezekiah do? Hezekiah was in a storm. What did Hezekiah do? Forgot to consult. He consulted the Lord quickly, right? Very quickly turned. I need help. Right? I'm in trouble. I'm going to die. I need help. Hezekiah now out of the storm essentially, has given this pass of an extra 15 years. Another enemy, Babylon, an enemy, shows up and asks to see all these riches, and now that he's doing okay, do we see Hezekiah consulting the Lord? No, we do not, right? There's a quick lesson here for us, right? The God of the storm is also the God of the high peaks of the mountain, right? We should be just as fervently as we consult the Lord during a difficult time in our lives. And we're very quick to do that. I think we'll all agree. We're very quick to, when things are tough, we're quick to go to God. But when things aren't as tough, we should be attacking our prayer life with the same fervency as when we are in the middle of a storm. That's what God wants out of us, and that's what He expects out of us. That's what we should be doing as well. Okay? We should be seeking Him the same way when things are bad, just as we are when things are good. And we see Hezekiah here not doing that. Verse 14, Isaiah hears of this, right? He hears of Hezekiah taking the Babylonian people around and showing them all this stuff, kind of showing off the wealth of the nation of Judah. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from far country, even far from Babylon. Even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thy house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in my house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. Now let's stop there for just a second. Okay? Babylon hears of Hezekiah and hears of this miracle essentially that's happened. And all of a sudden they show up, right? And they want to see everything that Hezekiah has. Now, Hezekiah, do you think he knows these people from Babylon very well? Probably not. Is the nation of Judah one of the more powerful nations in the world at this time? No, not really, but do they have a lot of things that people have wanted? Yes. Have people come in and attacked and taken gold and silver and all the stuff from them? Yes. So now we have a new nation that shows up, wants to see all of the stuff that's worthwhile in the kingdom of Hezekiah. Okay? Hezekiah shows them all the good stuff. Some random person comes to the house, my house, wants to come in and see all the, I don't have a ton of those things, but wants to see all the stuff I have. Am I going to just let them in and look at all my stuff? There's probably a reason they want to show up and look at stuff, right? Maybe they just want to be friends, but more than likely, I might be a little more leery of kind of what's going on there. But Hezekiah doesn't see it that way. He comes in, lets him in, shows him all the stuff. Isaiah then comes and asks him about it. And Isaiah said, verse 16, Unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the day comes, that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried unto Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons thou shalt issue from thee, that which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord, which thou hast spoken. And he said, Is it not good if peace and truth be in thy days? So when Isaiah hears of this exposure of essentially the nation's wealth, he announces to Hezekiah the judgment of God is going to fall on him. Hezekiah's possessions, Hezekiah's sons would all be taken into captivity. Hezekiah's response was one of just simple complacent acceptance. He wondered aloud whether there would be peace in his lifetime. Verse 19, Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, Is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? Once again, God helped Hezekiah to overcome the pride that he showed. Let's go one more thing, and we'll finish this up next week. Hezekiah has a humble prayer here. If we look here, here is Sennacherib's field commander threatening Hezekiah. This is the location here of Lachish. We see there, this green dot, if y'all can see that over there or not, but it's right here just north a little bit of where it says Judah. And this is Lachish that we talked about earlier. And this is the other places we're going to kind of see here throughout this kind of this point here of the humbling prayer of Hezekiah. So, king of Assyria against Sennacherib comes and encamps his armies against Judah. He does it at Lachish, which we see there. And Hezekiah then here has a response to this essentially military move from the king of Syria. His response is that he prepares for the attack. All right, so let's go back over to 2 Chronicles, chapter 32, where we're going to go. And there's some things that Hezekiah does to prepare for this impending attack. These things, and of the establishment thereof, Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, came and entered to Judah, and encamped against the fenced cities, and thought to win them for himself. And when Hezekiah saw Sennacherib was come, and that he was purposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the water of the fountains, which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together, who stopped all the fountains and the brooks that ran through the midst of the land, saying, Why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water? Also he strengthened himself and built up all the wall that was broken, and raised it up to the towers, and another wall without, and repaired Milo in the city of David, and made darts and shields and abundance. And he set captives of war over the people, and gathered them together to him in the streets of the gate of the city, and spake comfortably to them, saying, Be strong and courageous, be not afraid nor dismayed of the king of Syria, or for all the multitude that is with him. For there be with us more than with him. With him is an arm of flesh, but with us is what? What's it say there in verse 8? But with us is the Lord our God. Okay, so we see the king of Syria coming in, and we see the response of Hezekiah is what? Going to God, right? He's turning to God for the help. With us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people rested themselves upon the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. So we see in response to the king of Assyria, he cuts the water supply off so the Assyrians can't have any of it. He rebuilds and repairs the walls. Hezekiah tunnels from the Gihon Springs to Jerusalem, which supplied the city with fresh water, even during a siege. I think that's up there. No, it's not. There's a tunnel that he builds, kind of an aqueduct system. Yeah, we go with a good way to put it. To kind of funnel water into the city during the siege. And then we see also the response of him going to God. And making sure that the people that were there understood that they were relying on God. As we saw there, Hezekiah points out that the king of Assyria had only his men and the army they brought with him on his side. But Judah, the nation of Judah, had God on their side to help. Okay, and we're going to stop right there because Sennacherib now, he's in the field of Lachish. He doesn't have any water. He's trying to come in and siege the nation of Judah. And we see his response now. Some of the stuff that he's going to do. He sends the kingdom to Jerusalem, and there's a whole thing that kind of happens. It's going to take place here through the rest of chapter 18 of 2 Kings, as well as chapter 32 of 2 Kings. So we'll finish that up next week. We'll look at this event, call it an event. This next event in the life of Hezekiah, and kind of how he responds to that. And then we jump to our next king, which there's not a whole lot written about him. So there's just a couple of things in 2 Kings chapter 21 written about King Manasseh. And as good as Hezekiah was, he had some faults, right? We see those. But overall, Hezekiah did a lot of good things. Manasseh he was rebellious. Okay? He had a very, very rebellious heart. And we'll see the humbling of that rebellious heart from God's will. Okay? So that will finish up lesson 12 for next week. Then we'll jump into lesson 13, and then we're done, and we'll be heading on to something else. And what I need from you all, I've got a few minutes here, our next study, and you know what, we do this every time. It doesn't matter to me what we do. What I need is, do you want from you all, and again, it doesn't matter to me, do you want to stay Old Testament, or do we want to go New Testament for our next? So I need to get that ordered, so way I've got a couple weeks to get it here, so we can jump right into that when we get this finished. Do we want to stay Old Testament, or do we want to go New Testament? I see some people mouthing Old Testament too. Yeah, I see. Okay, so we'll stay Old Testament. Pastor Robert, you're going to be moving into anything? We're staying where we're at for a while. Right? We're getting a verse every 3 Sundays. We're so okay. So we're going to be going anywhere before. So I don't want to jump us doing the same thing. Just because I can't match up to that. So we'll stay in the Old Testament. We've done Genesis. Of course, 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles. I wish Mr. Jane was here. She has it written down what we've done. We did Esther. That was 2 years ago. We've done Ezra. We did Esther and Ezra together. Genesis, did we done Exodus yet? Have I done Exodus in Sunday school class? Those of you that are with me now for the 9 or 10 years that we do this, I think we have we? Okay, we'll look at, they've got a brand, Regular Baptist Press has a brand new Genesis study out too. That kind of, it's still Genesis, right? But they've got a new one. That was one of the first ones that I did, was Genesis. I've looked at it a couple times. I didn't really like sit down and look at it. I may look at it just kind of interested to kind of see, and I enjoy talking about the book of Genesis. It's one of the things I really enjoy doing. I know we've done that. We did that when I first started with the Genesis, which to me feels like not that long ago, but it's like year 9 or 10 I've been doing this now. So it's been a little while since we've done Genesis, and we did the ancient Genesis videos a couple of years ago. But so we made Genesis. There's Exodus there too. We look at that will be interesting. So I probably stay away from the minor prophets. We did those. I did those that was hard for me to do. There's second part of the minor prophets that we would get to, and I promise we'll get to it eventually. But the minor prophet one we did, that one was a fair for me, which was good for me. But I'll probably stay away from those. We'll probably do something Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. We'll probably do something in the Pentateuch. Kind of look at. Okay, so that's kind of where we'll go. Does that sound good to everybody? Yes? No? Yes? We did Song of Solomon. I know Chad asked for Song of Solomon for like 2 years. I did that one time. So we're not going to do that one again. So if we're good with something early Bible, or not early Bible, but you can understand what I'm saying. First couple of books, that's probably what we'll do, starting in a couple of weeks. Okay, does that sound good? Everybody on board with that? Yes? Sound good? All right, good. Let's pray.